Hi there, I'm Linda and this is Huttons Valley Permaculture. Well, homesteading life and growing your own food can be very rewarding, but it does take up quite a bit of time. In today's video, we're going to be looking at a few of the projects that have been keeping me busy. First up is a visit to the garlic patch, and the garlic's coming up quite nicely, but if you recall, I did plant some mustard seeds along with this initial patch of garlic, and because of the warm weather we've been having, the garlic really took off. And I found that it did impact the garlic. Now, I did spend a bit of time just carefully cutting out all the mustard because it was keeping the light from the garlic plants, I felt. So that took ages. You can see that over the back there, I cleared that area first and those plants have recovered nicely. There should be some nitrogen left in the soil from the mustard plants, so that might be impacting. But this section at the top here, where I cleared it a bit later, has still to kind of recover. It'll be interesting to see the difference because this patch here, I didn't plant any mustard seeds with, just to compare, but this was planted a month later. So I think it's an experiment that has failed and I probably won't be doing it again. Now I have just put the mustard plants in the pathways because it was just way too difficult to pop it in between my garlic plants. I felt they just needed some recovery time. So I will be covering this up with a bit more compostable ingredients like some sawdust and maybe some duck bedding, and then I'll be putting some more wood chips on top. Now, while I've still got to finish the paths next to my garlic plants, next to my former tomato beds, I've completed this path and really built it up, but I do find the paths settle down. And I'm just going to take my time and do garden clearing and doing the paths so that come spring, all these paths will be refreshed and full of organic material to hold the moisture for summertime. Because autumn was quite warm, and going into winter, we've only just started to get lots of rain and cooler conditions. My nasturtiums have been going berserk. So I've been cutting those back and using them to help build some of these paths. Usually the frost has knocked them back a lot, but it's sort of like a bonus organic material. So I'm really going to make the most of all this nasturtium, cut it all back and put it on my pathways as I redo them all. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of nasturtiums still to go to the compost. I've got a couple of compost bins still to fill. I've got 2 full, so I will be filling those other 2 bins as well as building the compost paths, just so that I've got plenty of organic material come the warmer growing months. Now, I do find that nasturtium tends to spread everywhere, and I just kind of pull it out, or you can cover it with mulch and bury it. It does pull out very easy, and I don't think it's a bad problem to have all this organic material just volunteering itself, and then you can feed that to chickens or just use it to build up garden beds and use it in your compost. Also in the front garden, I've done some plantings. I've got some onions started just here, and I've made sure to have a bit of a covering on just until they get established so the birds can't dig them up. And just here I've got some spring onions and some beetroot seedlings that I've added in. Hopefully I won't get too much bird activity in here, but I'll keep an eye on it and cover it if I need to. Towards the end of autumn and into winter, I usually like to get out to my swales to do some chop and drop. And this is the top swale, and I've just done a section here near my peaches where I've done lots of planting in addition to the chop and drop mulching. Now just here was an acacia tree that was getting quite large, so it needed to come down both to give space and light to this area. Now I did have some rosemary in already, which is starting to take off, but I did need to fill in some more plants. So each time I do cut down one of my support species, I do want to put in both productive species and also some more support. So I've cut that down, which did provide a heap of biomass, which I have used around my fruit trees. That one is a peach tree. And there's another peach tree just over there that I've used to mulch it. But I've been planting some other plants as well. This is a Westringia, which is an Australian native that bees love the flowers of. So I've planted that one in. I did propagate that from some plants that are nearby. Now, with cutting that acacia, it's opened up some light to this area. So I've put some strawberries in, which will hopefully start to spread and be a ground cover in this area. This one here is a rosemary. Now, I know I've already got some rosemaries in, but often it's just a case of putting plants in that I already have. So I've already propagated rosemary plants. The strawberry plants I just pulled out of the front garden there and spread around, and I've put in another rosemary at the top here. With removing this tree, it means there's a lot more light getting into this area, which should help these gooseberry plants, and I've got a few more over there. And again, I've just filled in the space with some strawberry plants. I figure by putting in strawberries, which will act as a ground cover, they're productive for a few years before they kind of crowd each other out. By that time, this plant will be bigger and shading that area. So then I'll be able to move strawberries to another spot where I'm kind of developing the whole food forest. Another acacia has been removed here and used for the chop and drop around the apricot tree here. And some more strawberry plants have been added in just in this section here, along with a pepino plant that I'm hoping will be protected from frost here. It's under the canopy of this acacia, and it should get plenty of light from the east over there. So I've struggled with getting these plants going before, but I would really like to, so we're going to give that one a go here. Now I've got a elderberry here and some support species, some Tagasasti, and I'm trialling growing a Leukemia plant, but I'm a bit afraid that it's too cool down here. A friend of mine up in Queensland sent me those seeds, so I'm trying to get those growing, but I don't know how successful it will be. But I'm trying just with any plants I have to put them in. Usually they've got some function, like the Tagasasti are fodder plants, they're a mulch producer, and they're also a nitrogen fixer, which means that when the plant dies, it'll release the nitrogen into the soil, which will be beneficial. But I'm filling in as much space as I can with the plants as I propagate them. Down the track, we can just remove plants and then add in more productive species as the areas become under control. So at this stage, I'm not too fast. It's just a matter of getting what plants you have into the ground just to take control of the space. It's fantastic when you do chop a large tree because it gives so much material that you can mulch lots of plants. Here is a fig tree that I'm nurturing. And it's just very small at the moment, but I'm hoping that with a bit of TLC that should take off soon. And just down from my fig tree, I've got some artichokes which are kicking back into life, and I have been around and just chopped some of the long grasses and used that for mulching those plants. Over the other side of the swale now, we've got some red currant plants, and I do have a few herbs hiding in here as well. Again, I've been able to use some of that tree for mulching here, and I've got a few more over here too, which just slowly you kind of get the area under control. Some more acacia chop and dropping here. This time I've been able to use this mulch around one of my smaller olive trees, which I'm yet to give some shape to. And just through over here, I've got another small olive tree. So again, we're just sort of opening up light to them, but also just building the soil and changing the soil profile so that it's more supportive of these productive trees. One thing I do love while working out in the swales are these beautiful little birds. I've got lots of blue wrens and the wonderful little grey fantails that keep me company while I'm out here. They really enjoy all the bugs that are stirred up by the activity in the food forest, so they love to come and join me. Sometimes the weather helps with the chop and drop. This one was downed in a strong wind and I haven't cleared it as yet, so there's plenty still to do in the chopping and dropping department. Now just behind me here is a section of my swale that I hadn't planted out very thickly as yet. So I've decided to get lots of plants in the ground over winter so they're ready to grow for spring. In here I've included some hazelnut trees which I've propagated, and also some of my peach or plum trees. I put 2 of those in and 3 hazelnut trees, and plenty of support for each of those trees as well. And this one's another Lucina, but they're not looking too happy. Yeah, just worried about it being a little bit too cold for them. With the Australian native support trees, I have just mostly mulched with cut grasses, but I've been putting in a little bit more thyme for the productive trees. Here I've got one of my fruit trees that I've grown from seed. So I have done a bit of compost, the cardboard, and topped it off with some wood chips. I'm up at the top of the property now near my hay shed, whose access has always been fairly difficult, and I find in winter I really just can't get to it. The paddocks get really wet and soggy, and you can see the marks that my tractor has left. I had to use my tractor the other day to do a couple of trips up and down to the gate, and you can see the path that it's left. So I'm going to change the access to this hay shed and improve that by putting a gate in just here. Just along this fence line is a lot of plantings of native trees. Now, a lot of them are pioneer species and they have been in the ground for quite some time, and they're getting old and falling down. So I will be clearing out sections and doing replanting, but for the moment I'm going to be focusing on clearing this one section and putting in a gate through here so that I can really quickly and easily access my hay shed. And it will just mean that I can utilise, the shed for more throughout winter and access the hay, for example. Or also when I'm doing my bees, I don't have to worry about where my animals are in the pasture to get to my bees and be able to do all the hive work. My nephew Trent has been giving me a hand. We cut this branch down the other day and did quite a bit of clearing, and I have been shredding a lot of this vegetation to use in a compost, and I'll be using it in my chicken coops as bedding and just part of the garden paths in the front garden. I was quoted $2,000 to have this cleared and chopped down, well, particularly this tree and the gum tree, but by doing it myself I've saved that money. It hasn't taken too much time so far, and I've been able to hang on to the gum tree because I've decided that I can still get my gate in, have the access, and keep my gum tree in place. Well, this tree is on a bit of an angle, and who knows, it might fall down one day. For the moment, I want to leave it for as long as possible because it does provide some shelter for my animals when they're grazing in this area. It's nice shade from the sun, and it does help form part of the windbreak. Just beyond the vegetation belt, there is this little driveway which leads to my neighbour's home, but it's not a private driveway. It is to be utilised by myself, the neighbour across there, as well as the one down the end of the road. So we might as well make the most of that track. Not every day is a fun day on the homestead. There are some difficult days. When you're growing your own food, which includes your own meat, you do have to face the time when the butcher comes. I have a mobile butcher who comes out, and after he's been, he leaves his refrigerated van in your driveway plugged in, and the meat will hang there for a week or 2. Now, I know there'll be people who are interested in seeing inside here and those that aren't, so if you don't want to see inside, please look away now. It is a tough process when you do love your animals and you look after them really well, but this is going to be a lot of meat from myself and my family. It's really important to me to know where my meat comes from and know that those animals were well fed and well looked after for their whole life. These animals were born on this farm and haven't been anywhere else, and I know they were looked after well. I understand that there's people who don't eat meat, and everyone's got their own reasons to choose the diets that are suitable for themselves, but meat is a part of the healing diet for me, and because I have the privilege to be able to grow my own meat, I think it's my responsibility to take charge of that aspect of my diet. I'm just sitting here editing this video and realised I forgot to mention something. I also have animals out on my pastures to help improve the soil. By rotating them each day, the soil starts to build, and I'm starting to see a variety of different plants growing, different flowers growing. It's bringing in insects, which brings in birds. You just find the whole ecosystem starts to improve. And as for the cows burping methane, well, that's all just part of a normal carbon cycle. I've recently been harvesting some of my ducks as well. With Muscovies, they do lay eggs, but they lay eggs with a purpose. If you don't let them sit on some of the eggs, they will keep finding new spots to lay them and hide away until the foxes get them. So what I've been doing is just let them sit on the eggs and get those ducklings hatched. And then I've been harvesting some of those ducklings because the duck numbers, they just get too high. I don't have housing for them. They're getting too big to fit into the housing I've got. And they're also doing damage to the pastures. As you can see, it's raining again and my pastures are really getting soggy, and the ducks follow the livestock where they've been and start digging up all the pasture, and it's just wrecking it. So I'm going to get their numbers down, which is great because they make duck broth, and duck fat is delicious, and some duck confit really makes a good healthy meal. So that's another hard day on the homestead when you have to go and harvest some of these animals as well. But it's just part of what you do with growing your own food. So this is an area of pasture where the ducks just get their little beaks in there and dig around, and it really messes things up. When the butcher returns, we have a cut-up day where we pack the meat and put it in the freezer. But there's still a lot to do after that day because I do make my own homemade sausages. I don't tolerate preservatives well, so I like to make my own sausages, and you can vary the flavour yourself as well. I also make my own hamburgers without any breads or anything in them, and pack that away so they're ready to use. I'll make beef jerky. I also do some fermented meats like bresaola, and I have tried biltong but wasn't successful, so I'll have to give that one another try. There's also the bone broth to make, and the fat to render down into tallow. Now you get cholesterol from animal fats, and that's actually a healthy thing for you. Cell membranes are made up of cholesterol, and hormones are made from cholesterol, including vitamin D. By having high levels of cholesterol, you get high levels of vitamin D, which actually acts as a natural sunscreen. I'll leave a link to a video by Dr. Paul Mason, who goes through cholesterol and vitamin D and its benefits for protecting you from the sun. It's really interesting, and I certainly learnt something from it, so I would encourage you to see that video. I also have a cookbook called Odd Bits, which helps you decide what to do with the parts of the animal that you're not familiar with. There's recipes for cheeks and the tails and the hearts and sweetbreads and the tongue. And so I utilise this a lot. I also make a lot of dog food with sort of the offal or the parts of the animal that I'm not going to eat myself. I dehydrate the liver for the dogs, well, the beef liver for the dogs. I have the lamb liver for myself. I also dehydrate the lungs into treats for the dogs, and I'll cut up the spleen for them. You know, the parts of the animal that I'm really not going to use myself don't go to waste, but my dogs really enjoy that. Well, you don't get bored on the homestead. There's always so much to do. I hope you've enjoyed having a look at what's been keeping me busy in the past week and what's still to keep me busy in the weeks to come. Thanks so much for watching, and bye for now.